James Mitchell couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his daughter laugh like this. 6-year-old Sophie pumped her legs on the swing, reaching higher and higher into the blue sky. These Saturday mornings at the park were worth every extra shift he worked. But then Sophie stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on something behind him. Before James could turn around, she jumped off the swing and started running. His heart stopped when he heard her cry out, "Mom!" There, in front of the big white mansion across the street, stood a woman James hadn't seen in 6 years. The look on her face told him she never expected to see them either. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Time seemed to slow as James rushed after Sophie, his work-worn boots heavy on the pavement. The mansion loomed before them, its pristine white columns and manicured gardens a stark contrast to their modest apartment across town. Sophie had already reached the woman, Catherine, who stood frozen on her doorstep, spilled coffee, forming a dark pool around her designer shoes. "Sophie, wait!" James called out. But his daughter had already wrapped her arms around Catherine's legs, looking up at her with pure joy. Catherine's hands hovered uncertainly over Sophie's head, trembling slightly as she met James's eyes over their daughter's dark curls. "She looks just like you," Catherine whispered, her voice catching. She was thinner than James remembered, her once casual style replaced by elegant designer clothes. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had once held his whole world, were the same. James gently pulled Sophie back. "Honey, we should go." "But Daddy, it's Mom, like in the pictures." Sophie's voice rang with excitement and James felt his chest tighten. The pictures, the worn photo album he kept in his bedside drawer, the one Sophie would sometimes find and page through when she thought he wasn't looking. Catherine seemed to gather herself, straightening her silk blouse. "Please, come in, just for a moment." Her eyes darted to the neighboring houses, where curious faces had begun to appear in windows. "I think we all need to talk," James wanted. To refuse, to protect Sophie from the inevitable pain that would come from this encounter, but his daughter's hopeful face made the decision for him. "Okay, just for a minute." The interior of Catherine's home was like something from the magazines James sometimes saw at the grocery store checkout. Sophie's eyes went wide at the crystal chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the artwork that probably cost more than he made in a year. "My office is through here," Catherine said, leading them down a hallway lined with family photos. James noticed Sophie studying each one, and his heart clenched when he saw what she was looking for, herself. But these photos showed a different life. Catherine with a distinguished-looking man, Catherine at charity galas, Catherine accepting some kind of award. The office was warm and welcoming, with leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Catherine gestured for them to sit, then disappeared briefly, returning with a glass of water for each of them. Her hands shook slightly as she set them down. "How?" she started, then cleared her throat. "How did you know it was me, Sophie?" Sophie reached into the tiny backpack she always carried at the park, the one filled with snacks and small treasures. She pulled out a folded photograph, creased and worn at the edges. James recognized it immediately. Catherine holding newborn Sophie in the hospital, her smile radiant despite the exhaustion evident on her face. "I found it in Daddy's special book," Sophie explained. "He keeps it in his drawer, but sometimes I look at it when I'm sad. You look different now, but your smile is the same." Catherine's composed facade cracked slightly. She reached for the photo with trembling fingers, then stopped herself. "James, I don't." His voice was harder than he intended, and Sophie looked between them with confusion. "We should go." "Please," Catherine said quickly. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but could we talk? After Sophie's bedtime, perhaps." "There are things you need to know." James stood, taking Sophie's hand. "I think we've known everything we needed to know for the past 6 years." But Sophie tugged at his hand. "Daddy, can we come back? Please, I want to show Mom my school pictures and tell her about my part in the play." The hope in his daughter's A voice was like a physical pain in his chest. He looked at Catherine, who was watching Sophie with a mixture of longing and fear that seemed genuine. Despite everything, he recognized that expression. It was the same one he wore every time he looked at their daughter. "I'll come back tonight," he said finally. 8 o'clock. But just to talk. Catherine nodded, relief evident in her features. As they turned to leave, Sophie broke away and ran back to hug Catherine once more. This time, Catherine hugged her back, and James saw tears in her eyes. "I'm so happy I found you," Sophie whispered, and James had to look away from the raw emotion on Catherine's face. As they walked back to their car, Sophie chattering excitedly about returning, James felt the weight of the past 6 years pressing down on him. The photo album at home contained more than just pictures. It held a story he'd tried to forget, one of love and loss, of choices made in desperate moments, of a young couple who'd wanted different things from life. Tonight, he'd have to face that story again. But first he had to figure out how to protect his daughter's heart when the truth finally came out. 8 o'clock found James standing at Catherine's door again, this time without Sophie's excited chatter to fill the heavy silence. The evening air was cooler now, carrying the first hints of autumn. He'd changed into his best shirt, a habit, from years of trying to prove himself, then felt foolish for caring what she might think. Catherine answered on the first knock. She'd changed too, into something more casual that reminded him of the woman he used to know. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, leading him to the same office as before. 2 glasses of wine waited on the coffee table. "I don't drink anymore," James said, remaining standing. "Right." Catherine flushed slightly. "Water. Let's just talk." She nodded, sinking into one of the leather chairs. From a drawer in her desk, she withdrew a small plastic bag containing what looked like a hospital bracelet, worn and faded with age. James recognized it immediately, Sophie's newborn ID band. "I kept it," Catherine said, her voice barely above. A whisper. "I kept everything, except us." The words came out before James could stop them. Catherine's fingers traced the bracelet's edges. "I was sick, James. So sick. But not in a way anyone could see." "Postpartum depression," James said flatly. "I know. The doctors told me after you left." "It was more than that." Catherine's composure cracked slightly. "It was like drowning while everyone told me how lucky I was to be swimming. This beautiful house, a healthy baby, a loving husband. I had everything I was supposed to want, but I couldn't feel anything except terror." James finally sat, his anger warring with an old familiar need to comfort her. "You could have told me. We could have gotten help." "I did get help. Eventually." She opened another drawer and pulled out a thick medical file. 3 months of inpatient treatment, another year of intensive therapy. By then, she trailed off, pain evident in her expression. "By then you'd built a new life," James finished, "one that didn't include us." "No!" The force of her response startled them both. "I tried to come back. I drove by the apartment every day for weeks. But you'd moved, and my lawyer said any contact might hurt my mental health evaluation." "Your lawyer?" James's voice went cold. "So you were planning to take Sophie?" Catherine shook her head desperately. "No, never. I wanted to make sure I was healthy enough to be in her life at all. The lawyer was to protect my visitation rights, but then," she gestured helplessly at the grand house around them, "life got complicated. I married Thomas, his kids needed a mother figure, and the shame of abandoning my own child became easier to live with than facing it." James couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "Became a wall I didn't know how to break down," Catherine corrected quietly. "I've watched Sophie grow up from a distance, every school play, every park visit. I donated anonymously to her school, made sure her class always had the best supplies. It was cowardly, I know." James thought of all the mysterious scholarships that had come through for Sophie's activities, the anonymous donations that always seemed to benefit her class, specifically. "That was you," Catherine nodded, tears finally spilling over. "It was the only way I knew to be her mother without without risking her happiness. You've done such an amazing job with her, James. She's everything I could have hoped for, and that's because of you. She deserved to know you, James said, his voice rough with emotion. I kept your pictures, told her you loved her. Even when I was angry, I never let her think. He stopped, collecting himself. She needed her mother, I know. Catherine's hands twisted together in her lap. I've been in therapy again, working toward this moment. I just didn't expect it to come from Sophie recognizing me. She's so bright, so observant. Like you, James said softly, then immediately regretted the intimacy of the observation. Catherine stood suddenly, moving to a large cabinet in a corner. She opened it to reveal dozens of neatly organized boxes, each labeled with a year and month. I kept everything, every school photo I could get, every newspaper clipping when her class did something noteworthy, reports from the private investigator I hired to make sure she was happy, healthy. She broke off at James's expression. Too much? A bit stalkerish, he admitted, but without real anger. The revelation that Catherine had been watching over them all along was oddly comforting, even if her methods were questionable. What do we do now? Catherine asked, sinking back into her chair. Sophie knows I'm here. She wants a relationship. But I don't want to disrupt her life any more than I already have. James was quiet for a long moment, studying the woman before him. She was different from the young mother who'd disappeared 6 years ago, stronger in some ways, more fragile in others. But her love for Sophie, complicated as it was, seemed genuine. We take it slow, he said finally. Supervised visits. No promises we can't keep. And you tell her the truth. An age-appropriate version, when the time is right. She deserves that much. Catherine nodded, relief evident in every line of her body. Thank you, she whispered. I know I don't deserve a second chance. This isn't about what you deserve, James said, standing to leave. It's about what Sophie deserves. Remember that. As he walked to his car, the hospital bracelet's image stayed with him, a tiny paper circle that had once connected them all, now worn thin with years of hidden grief and regret. The next morning came too early, as it always did. James stared at the stack of bills on his kitchen counter while the ancient coffee maker sputtered and wheezed. Electric bill marked final notice. Sophie's dance class tuition, the rent increase. Notice. Each envelope felt heavier than the last. Daddy, can we visit Mom today? Sophie called from her tiny bedroom, where she was supposedly getting dressed for school. James closed his eyes briefly. Not today, sweetheart. Daddy has to work. Both jobs, remember? The disappointment in her voice was clear. But tomorrow. He thought of Catherine's elegant home, the careful way she'd organized Sophie's entire life from afar. His daughter deserved that kind of stability, but pride and something deeper, fear maybe, made him hesitate. His phone buzzed. A text from the garage where he worked during the day. Another mechanic had called in sick, double shift available. The extra money would help with Sophie's dance class, but it meant cancelling their evening plans. Sophie, honey, he called out, we might have to skip the library tonight. She appeared in the doorway, her school uniform slightly rumpled, one sock higher than the other. But we always go on Tuesdays. You promised. The guilt was immediate and familiar. I know, but Mr. Chen needs help at the garage. Remember how we talked about sometimes having to make hard choices? Sophie's lower lip trembled, but she nodded bravely. For the greater good, she quoted their familiar phrase, though her voice wavered. James knelt to fix her sock, his heart heavy. That's my girl. Maybe we can read extra chapters tomorrow. Night. Can we invite Mom to read with us? The question caught him off guard. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again, this time an email from Sophie's school. The annual field trip fee was due, another expense he hadn't planned for. We'll see, he said finally, straightening her collar. Now breakfast, what'll it be? We have cereal or cereal. Sophie giggled despite her disappointment. Cereal, please. As she ate, James sorted through the bills again. Even with the extra shift, something would have to wait. The field trip fee, maybe. He could talk to the school about a payment plan. His phone chimed with a text from Catherine. "How is Sophie this morning? I'd love to take her to the library sometime, if that's okay." James stared at the message, emotions churning. Catherine could easily afford the field trip, the dance classes, everything Sophie deserved. But accepting help felt like admitting failure, or worse, giving Catherine leverage in Sophie's life. "Daddy," Sophie's voice pulled him back to the unpresent. "You're making your worried face." He forced a smile. "Just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Finish your cereal or we'll be late." The rest of the morning passed in its usual rush, dropping Sophie at school, racing to the garage, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of engines and oil changes. But Catherine's text nagged at him. During his lunch break, he found himself parked outside the bank, staring at their modest balance. The truth was stark. Something had to give, either his pride or Sophie's opportunities. His phone buzzed again. "Catherine, no pressure about the library. Just wanted you to know I'm happy to help however you're comfortable with." James thought of Sophie's face when she'd recognized Catherine, the joy untainted by adult complications. He thought of the hospital bracelet Catherine had kept all these years, the careful files of Sophie's life. Finally, he typed back, "Sophie has a dance recital next month. Maybe you'd like to come." The response was immediate. "I'd love that." "Thank you, James." He put the phone away and pulled out the field trip form. Sometimes being a good parent meant swallowing your pride. Sometimes the greater good meant letting go of old hurts. Besides, he thought as he started the car, Sophie had inherited Catherine's grace. She deserved to have her mother see her dance. The birthday party invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to James's apartment. The cream-colored envelope bore Sophie's name in elegant calligraphy, and inside, the card sparkled with subtle gold accents. It was exactly the kind of thing Catherine would choose. "Princess Tea Party," the invitation announced, in honor of Sophie Mitchell's 7th birthday. James ran his thumb over the embossed lettering, remembering previous birthdays celebrated with dollar store decorations and homemade cakes. Sophie had never complained, but now— "What's that?" Sophie asked, appearing beside him in her pajamas, hair still mussed from sleep. "Your mom wants to throw you a birthday party," James said carefully, watching her reaction. Sophie's eyes lit up as she took in the glittering invitation. A real princess party, like Olivia had? Olivia, the daughter of one of Catherine's wealthy neighbors, who Sophie had met during a supervised visit last week. James had noticed how his daughter's eyes had lingered on the girl's pristine party dress and perfect braids. "Even better," he said, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. "Your mom has a beautiful garden for tea parties." Sophie hugged the invitation to her chest. "Can I invite my whole class, and Ms. Rodriguez, and Jenny from dance?" "We'll have to check with your mom about the guest list," James said, already imagining the social complications. Would the other parents feel comfortable sending their kids to a stranger's house? Would they judge him for allowing it? His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "I hope the invitation arrived. Please let me do this for her." Another message followed quickly. "You'll be co-host, of course. I've already arranged for your suit fitting." James felt his jaw tighten. Of course, Catherine would think he needed a new suit. He started to type an angry response, then deleted it. This wasn't about him. "Daddy," Sophie was watching him with that too perceptive expression she sometimes got. "We don't have to have a big party. We could do pizza and movies like last year." The selfless offer, so characteristic of his thoughtful daughter, made his decision for him. "No, sweetheart. You deserve a princess party. Let's call your mom and start planning." Catherine answered on the first ring. "She got the invitation?" "She loves it," James said, putting the phone on speaker. "Someone wants to talk party details." Sophie grabbed the phone. "Mom, can we have a chocolate fountain and real teacups? Olivia said you collect them." Catherine's laugh carried through the speaker, warm and genuine. "We can have anything you want, sweet girl. Why don't you and Daddy come over this weekend to help plan? I'll show you my teacup collection." As Sophie chatted excitedly about cake flavors and party games, James noticed a familiar shadow cross Catherine's face, visible through the video call, each time their daughter mentioned a first they'd share. First tea party together, first time trying on fancy dresses together, first birthday cake made together. 6 years of missed firsts hung between them. Later that evening, after Sophie had finally fallen asleep, the invitation tucked safely under her pillow, James sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, making lists. Things he could sell to buy Sophie a party dress, extra shifts he could pick up. Pride was one thing, but he wouldn't let his daughter feel like the poor relation. At her own birthday party, his phone lit up with another text from Catherine. "I know you're worried about expenses. Please let me handle everything. It's not charity, James. It's 6 years of missed birthdays." He stared at the message for a long time before responding. "She wants to invite her whole class, around 20 kids." Catherine's reply was immediate. "Perfect. I'll call the party planner tomorrow." James set the phone down, torn between gratitude and discomfort. A party planner, teacups, designer dresses. How long before Sophie realized the gap between her two worlds? How long before she started wishing for more than he could give? The invitations sparkled on the counter, catching the dim kitchen light. A princess tea party. Because his daughter, with her brave heart and generous spirit, deserved nothing less, even if it meant letting Catherine back into their lives in a bigger way than he'd planned, even if it meant facing his own insecurities about what he could and couldn't provide. The day before the party planning session, Catherine sat in her therapist's office, a familiar leather-bound journal open in her lap. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been her therapist for the past 5 years, watching her work through the grief and guilt of leaving Sophie. "You've been writing in the journal again," Dr. Martinez observed, noting the fresh ink on the pages. Catherine nodded, running her fingers over the words she'd written last night. "I had another dream about the hospital, about the day I left." The journal entry stared back at her. "I dream of the same moment, standing in that sterile hallway, my bags packed, James begging me to stay. Sophie was asleep in the nursery. I couldn't even kiss her goodbye. I told myself she would be better, off without a broken mother. Now I know I was the one who was broken, not my love for her." "You're not that person anymore," Dr. Martinez said gently. "Aren't I?" Catherine closed the journal. "James looks at me like he's waiting for me to disappear again. And he's right to worry. What if I'm not strong enough? What does your journal tell you about your strength?" Catherine flipped to an earlier entry, dated just after she'd first seen Sophie at the park 3 years ago. "Watched S playing today. She has James's laugh. I wanted to run to her, explain everything. Instead, I called my therapist. Progress is choosing to get help instead of running away." "I've been making progress," Catherine admitted, "but seeing them every day now, being part of their lives, it's stirring up old feelings. The anxiety, the unworthiness." Catherine turned to a recent entry. "Sophie wants me to help bake her birthday cake. Such a simple thing, but I never learned how. I had staff for that. After I married Thomas. What kind of mother doesn't know how to bake her daughter's birthday cake?" "A mother who's learning," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "You've been doing the work, Catherine. 6 years of therapy, medication when needed, building a support system. You're not the same person who left that hospital." Catherine opened the journal to its first page, where a younger version of herself had written in shaky handwriting, "I don't deserve to be a mother." The words still had power to hurt, but now she could recognize them as symptoms of her illness, not truth. "I told James about the postpartum depression," she said, "but not about after the suicide attempt." Catherine nodded. That page of the journal remained the hardest to read. "They found me in time. Thomas says I'm lucky. All I can think about is Sophie growing up thinking I chose to leave her twice. You think James needs to know? I think he needs to understand that leaving wasn't a choice. It was survival." Catherine closed the journal carefully. "I'm going to show him Tomorrow, when he brings Sophie to plan the party. He deserves to know everything. That's very brave, Dr. Martinez said. How are you feeling about that decision? Catherine pulled out her phone, showing a photo Sophie had sent her, father and daughter making silly faces at the camera. My courage now. Sophie deserves parents who can be honest with each other, even about the hard things. Later that night, Catherine added a new entry to her journal. Tomorrow I show James the truth. The depression, the hospital stays, the years of healing. Sophie has his strength. I see it in every smile, every resilient moment. Maybe it's time to find my own strength, not in hiding the broken pieces, but in showing how they've been mended. She closed the journal and placed it on her bedside table, next to the party planning materials and a beginner's cake decorating book she'd bought that afternoon. Tomorrow would change everything. Again. But this time, she was ready. This time, she had the tools to face her past without running from it. This time, she would be worthy of the second chance her daughter had given her. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with pre-performance energy. Backstage, Sophie twirled in her princess costume, the sequins catching the light. It wasn't the expensive designer dress Catherine had originally offered to buy. James had put his foot down about that, but rather a compromise. A lovely consignment store find that Catherine had expertly altered herself. Are you nervous, sweetheart? James adjusted Sophie's crown, careful not to disturb the fancy braid Catherine had done an hour earlier. A little. Sophie clutched her script, but Mom said it's okay to be nervous. She said she still gets butterflies before big meetings. The casual way Sophie now said Mom still caught James off guard sometimes. 3 weeks had passed since Catherine had shared her journal, since they'd both cried over past pain and begun to forge a new understanding. Now, they were trying this co-parenting thing for real, one day at a time. Your mom's right, James said, spotting Catherine making her way through the backstage chaos. She carried a small bouquet of roses, purple, Sophie's favorite color. There's my star. Catherine's smile was genuine, though James noticed the tension in her shoulders. This was their first truly public appearance as whatever they were. Now, already he'd caught other parents whispering, noticed the curious glances. Sophie grabbed both their hands. Will you both watch from the same spot, so I can see you together? James and Catherine exchanged a look over their daughter's head. They hadn't planned for this. Of course we will, Catherine said smoothly. Though James saw the question in her eyes, he nodded. Front row, stage left, your favorite spot. Sophie beamed, then frowned slightly. Is it okay if I tell my friends you're my mom? Madison didn't believe me. Catherine's face fell for just a moment before she recovered. You can tell them whatever makes you comfortable, sweet girl. I'm going to tell them the truth, Sophie declared. That my mom was sick, but she got better, and now she's back and she makes the best braids ever. James watched Catherine blink back tears. They'd worked hard on how to explain things to Sophie, age-appropriate truths that neither sugarcoated the past nor turned it into something shameful. Places everyone, Ms. Rodriguez, the drama teacher, called out. Parents, please find your seats. Sophie hugged them both quickly. Don't forget to sit together. As they made their way to their seats, James could feel the stares. Catherine walked beside him, head high, but fingers fidgeting with her purse. Strap, we can sit separately, she whispered, if it's easier. James thought of Sophie's face when she'd asked them to sit together. No, we're doing this for her. The lights dimmed, and Sophie took the stage as the princess who had to save her kingdom through the power of kindness. She'd practiced her lines for weeks, bouncing between both homes, both parents offering different but complementary support. James had helped her with memorization, while Catherine had taught her about stage presence. A princess's true power, Sophie proclaimed from the stage, isn't in her crown, but in her heart. Catherine's hand found James's in the dark, squeezing once before letting go. A shared moment of pride, of recognition that their daughter had somehow gained wisdom they were only now learning themselves. After the show, Sophie ran to them still in her costume, glowing with success and pride. Other parents crowded around, some offering congratulations, others barely concealing their curiosity about Catherine's presence. Mrs. Chen, Madison's mother, approached carefully. "I didn't realize you were... That is, Sophie's been talking about her mom, but we thought..." "I'm Sophie's mother," Catherine said firmly, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I've been away, but I'm back now." The whispers intensified, but Sophie just smiled up at both her parents. "Can we get ice cream? All three of us?" "It's a school night," James started. "Special occasion," Catherine said at the same time. They looked at each other, then laughed. Co-parenting was still new territory, full of moments like this. "One scoop," James conceded. "You did great up there, princess." As they left the auditorium, Sophie between them still wearing her costume, James realized something. They might not look like a typical family, but they were finally starting to feel like one. The manila envelope sat like a bomb on Catherine's desk. Her family lawyer, Richard Sterling, waited patiently while she read through the custody papers for the third time. "It's a standard agreement," he said, tapping the signature line. "Joint, legal custody, generous visitation schedule. Given your resources and recent stability, we could push for more, but I understand you want to keep things amicable." Catherine set the papers down, remembering James's face at the school play just 2 weeks ago. The trust they'd been building, so fragile and new. "This will destroy everything we've accomplished." "Catherine," Richard leaned forward, his expensive suit crinkling, "you need to protect your rights. Right now, you have no legal standing. Mr. Mitchell could cut off access at any time." "James wouldn't do that." "The same James Mitchell who's been refusing your financial help? Who insisted on a second-hand costume for the school play?" Richard's tone was gentle but firm. "You need to think about Sophie's best interests." Catherine stood, walking to her office window. The garden below was being decorated for Sophie's upcoming birthday party. "I am thinking about her best interests. She needs stability, not a legal battle. What she needs is a mother with clear legal rights to make decisions about her future." Richard pulled out another document. "Mr. Mitchell's financial situation is concerning. A joint custody agreement would allow you to set up proper trusts. Educational accounts..." "Stop!" Catherine turned sharply. "You're talking about him like he's some deadbeat dad. He's been everything to Sophie, everything I couldn't be. Because you were ill. A fact the courts will consider, especially given your excellent recovery and current stability." The custody papers seemed to mock her from the desk, black and white lines trying to define something far more complex. She thought of her therapy journal, of all the work she'd done to earn back trust. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I have papers served to James, I'll lose him, his trust, his willingness to co-parent. You'll gain legal rights to your daughter by forcing her father into court, by making him fight to keep the life he's built for her." Catherine shook her head. "That's not who I want to be anymore." A knock at her office door interrupted them. Thomas, her husband, entered with an apologetic smile. "Sorry to interrupt, but Sophie's on the phone. Something about wanting your opinion on birthday cake flavors." Catherine's heart clenched. Such a normal maternal moment, the kind she'd dreamed of during her darkest days, and it had come through patience and healing, not legal demands. "Richard," she said firmly, "thank you for preparing these, but I won't be needing them." Catherine, "No." She gathered the papers and handed them back. "I left once because I was sick and scared. I won't let legal papers make me the person who hurts them again." After Richard left, Thomas lingered. "You know he's right about one thing. You need some legal protection." Catherine picked up her phone, looking at the latest photo James had sent, Sophie attempting to teach herself cartwheels in their small backyard. "What I need is to be worthy of the trust they're showing me. And if James changes his mind, if he decides to limit your access, then I'll deal with it then." Catherine dialed Sophie's number, smiling at her daughter's excited greeting. "Hi, sweetheart. Tell me more about these cake flavors." Later that night, she added a new entry to her therapy journal. "Today, I chose trust over legal rights. Maybe that makes me naive. But 6 years ago, I let fear drive me away from my daughter. Today, I choose to let love guide me back to her. Not through courts or custody papers, but through birthday cakes and cartwheels and the slow rebuilding of faith. She closed the journal and looked at her phone. After a moment's hesitation, she texted James, "Thank you for sharing her with me. I know you don't have to." His response came quickly. "She needs both of us. We're figuring it out." Such simple words, but they meant more than any legal document ever could. The box of letters had lived in James's closet for 6 years, pushed to the back behind winter coats and old shoes. He hadn't opened it since the day Catherine left, but Sophie's birthday party tomorrow had him feeling nostalgic, or maybe just brave enough to face the past. The first letter was dated just days after Catherine's departure. "My dearest Catherine, Sophie won't stop crying for you. Or maybe that's me. I don't know anymore. The doctors say postpartum depression can make you feel trapped, make you run. I want to believe that's all this is, that you'll come back to us when you're better. I'm holding on to that hope with everything I have." A knock at his apartment door startled him. Catherine stood there, holding a similar box. "I thought it was time," she said softly, "to share our sides of the story." James let her in, noticing how she took in the apartment's modest furnishings without judgment. They sat at his small kitchen table, their respective letters between them like a bridge. Or a barrier, he wasn't sure which. "You first," he said. Catherine pulled out a letter, the paper crisp despite its age. This was returned unopened, like all the others. She read, "James, I'm in a facility outside Seattle. The doctors say I'm improving, but all I can think about is Sophie's first smile, and how I missed it. Did she sleep through the night yet? Does she still like that lullaby? I know I have no right to ask, but please, just tell me she's okay." James frowned. "I never received any letters." "Your mother," Catherine said quietly. "She told me you'd moved, changed numbers, that you never wanted to hear from me again." The revelation hit James like a physical blow. His mother, so determined to protect him, had instead stolen years of potential healing. "She thought she was helping," he said, but the words felt hollow. "After you left, I was a mess. She stepped in, helped with Sophie, and made sure I couldn't find you." Catherine's voice held no anger, just old sadness. "By the time I discovered you hadn't moved, that she'd been intercepting everything, I was already married to Thomas. It seemed too late." James pulled out another letter, this one tear-stained and crumpled. "Sophie took her first steps today. She was reaching for your photo on the mantel. How do I tell her that sometimes people leave and don't come back? How do I make her understand when I don't understand myself?" "I watched her first day of kindergarten from my car," Catherine confessed. "You were both there, looking so complete without me. I convinced myself you were better off." "We weren't." James's voice was rough. "We just learned to live with the hole you left." Catherine reached into her box and withdrew a newspaper clipping, James's first advertisement for his mechanic business. "I saved everything about you both, asked mutual friends for updates, donated anonymously to Sophie's school, like somehow that could make up for not being there. Why didn't you just come back after you got better?" "Shame." Catherine spread her letters across the table. Each day that passed made it harder, and then there was Thomas, his kids, the foundation work. I built a life around the hole in my heart. Told myself it was for the best. James understood. That kind of self-deception. Hadn't he done the same, building a life around Sophie that left no room for what-ifs? They read more letters, sharing the parallel stories of their years apart. Catherine's gradual recovery, James's struggles to build a stable life, both of them loving Sophie in their own ways. "I have one more," Catherine said finally, pulling out a letter dated just last week. "I haven't sent it yet. Dear Sophie, someday when you're older, you'll ask why I left. The truth is complicated, but you deserve to know it all. I was sick, in a way that made me believe you deserved better than me. I was wrong. You deserved the truth, the chance to know both your parents, the opportunity to be loved in all the ways we could love you. I can't change the past, but I promise you this. Every day forward, I choose to be here, not because I'm your perfect mother, I'm not, but because I'm your mother who learned the hard way that love means staying, even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when you don't feel worthy. You taught me that, my brave girl, by running to me that day in the park, by opening your heart without hesitation, by loving both your parents despite our mistakes. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm here. Now, James wiped his eyes. She should have that letter for when she's ready. Catherine nodded, adding it to the box. We should keep all of these, so she can understand someday. Understand what? That love isn't perfect. That people can make terrible mistakes and still find their way back. That family is something you choose to build every day. James gathered the letters carefully, preserving their fragile history. Tomorrow was Sophie's birthday party, a celebration of new beginnings. But tonight was about understanding how they got here, about laying the past to rest so they could move forward. Dr. Martinez's family therapy room looked nothing like her regular office. Instead of leather chairs and mahogany desk, there were comfortable couches, child-sized furniture, and a shelf full of toys. The notebook she held was different too, bigger, with space for multiple perspectives on each page. So, she said, looking at the three people arranged awkwardly on the couch, who wants to start? Sophie, sandwiched between her parents, raised her hand. I have a question in the special notebook you gave me. Dr. Martinez smiled encouragingly. Go ahead. Sophie pulled out a spiral notebook decorated with unicorn stickers. Catherine recognized it as one she'd bought during their last shopping trip together. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, Sophie explained, flipping to a marked page. Why do grown-ups make everything so complicated? James let out a surprised laugh, and even Catherine couldn't help smiling. Dr. Martinez made a note in her therapy notebook. That's a very good question, she said. What made you write it down? Sophie shrugged. Yesterday, Mom wanted to take me for ice cream after school, but Dad said we had to check the schedule first. But we didn't need a schedule before. We just had ice cream when we wanted. How did that make you feel? Dr. Martinez asked, pen poised, confused, and a little mad. Sophie looked up at her parents. I love you both. Why can't we just do things together? Catherine felt James tense beside their daughter. They'd been trying so hard to maintain boundaries, to follow the parenting book's advice about structure and consistency. Had they overcomplicated things in the process? Sophie, Dr. Martinez said gently, sometimes parents need rules and schedules to make sure everything is fair, but you're right. Sometimes adults can make things more complicated than they need to be. What would make it better for you? Sophie thought for a moment. Maybe we could have a family notebook, like my school planner, but for fun things we want to do together? Dr. Martinez wrote something in her notebook, then turned to the parents. What do you think about that idea? It could work, James said slowly. Something simple, where we all can see what's planned. Catherine nodded. I could put it on my phone, share the calendar. No, Sophie interrupted. A real notebook, one we can draw in and put stickers on, like a family story. Dr. Martinez smiled. Sometimes children have the best solutions. They see things simply. She turned to a fresh page in her notebook. Let's talk about what this family story might look like. For the next hour, they worked together, Sophie drawing pictures while the adults talked through logistics. Dr. Martinez guided them gently, helping translate between adult complexities and childlike simplicity. When Sophie went to explore the toy shelf, Dr. Martinez addressed the parents directly. You're both trying very hard to do everything right, she observed. Sometimes that can become its own problem. We don't want to mess this up, Catherine admitted. After everything, Dr. Martinez said firmly, you've created a child who feels secure enough to tell you exactly what she needs. That's remarkable. James watched Sophie playing. She makes it look so easy, Love them both, she says. Do things together. Children often have wisdom we've forgotten. Dr. Martinez made a final note in her notebook. Your homework this week is to follow Sophie's lead. One unscheduled ice cream, one spontaneous family moment. See what happens. After the session, they stood in the parking lot, Sophie still clutching her unicorn notebook. Can we get ice cream? She asked hopefully. Catherine and James looked at each other over her head. All the complexities of their situation hung between them. Schedules, boundaries, expectations. Yes, they said together, and Sophie's smile lit up the gathering dusk. Later that night, James found Sophie adding to her notebook. What are you writing, sweetheart? Today's story, she said, showing him a page covered in crayon drawings. See? Here's us at Dr. Martinez's office, and here's us getting ice cream, and here's Mom teaching you how to make sundaes the fancy way. James looked at the simple drawings. 3 stick figures, always together, always smiling. Through his daughter's eyes, their complicated family looked perfectly natural. Can I add something? He asked. Sophie handed him a crayon. Under her drawings, he wrote, Day 1 of our new family story. Sophie stood in her new bedroom at Catherine's house, surrounded by shopping bags. The room was 3 times the size of her bedroom at Dad's apartment, with a window seat overlooking the garden and enough space for a reading nook. But something felt off. We can paint it any color you want, Catherine said from the doorway, trying to hide her nervousness. And I thought maybe we could get a canopy for the bed like a princess. Can we use my old bedspread instead? Sophie asked, pulling out the worn quilt James's mother had made her. And maybe my star lamp. Catherine's face softened. Of course. This is your space, sweetheart. We want it to feel like home. Home. Sophie had 2 of those now. 2 beds, 2 dressers, 2 of almost everything. Dr. Martinez said it was normal to feel weird about it, but that didn't make it easier. What if we forgot something at Dad's? Sophie worried, clutching her unicorn notebook. What if I need it? Then we'll go get it, Catherine said simply, or your dad will bring it. We're all figuring this out together, remember? They unpacked slowly, finding places for Sophie's treasures from both worlds. The fancy new books Catherine had bought shared shelf space with the dog-eared paperbacks from Dad's. The expensive art supplies she'd been given sat next to her trusty old crayons. James arrived with another box just as they were finishing. Found some things you might want over here, he said, setting it down carefully. Sophie opened it eagerly. Inside were photos of her and James through the years, ready to join the new one she was making with Catherine. I thought, James cleared his throat. I thought maybe we could take some new pictures, all of us, for both rooms. Catherine blinked back tears. I'd like that. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep in her new old bed, Catherine found James in the kitchen. Thank you, she said quietly, for making this easier for her. James looked around the gleaming kitchen, so different from his own. This back and forth, I worry it's too much for her. Dr. Martinez says kids are resilient. They can handle 2 homes if the parents make it feel normal. Normal, James laughed softly. Nothing about this is normal, Catherine. No, she agreed, but maybe it's better than normal. Maybe it's exactly what Sophie needs, all of us trying our best to get it right. The next morning, Sophie woke up, confused for a moment, then remembered where she was. She padded to her new window seat, morning light making patterns on the floor. From here, she could see both houses, the mansion where she now spent 3 nights a week, and in the distance, the apartment building she'd always called home. She opened her unicorn notebook and wrote, Things that are different. Mom's house is bigger. Dad's house has better mac and cheese. Mom has fancy soap. Dad tells better bedtime stories, things that are the same. They both tuck me in. They both check for monsters. They both love me. I love them both. When Catherine came to call her for breakfast, she found Sophie arranging photos on her wall, a perfect mix of old and new, past and present, both her worlds coming together in one space. Perfect, Catherine said, and meant it. At school that day, Sophie's teacher asked the class to draw their homes. Without hesitation, Sophie drew two pictures side by side, connected by a rainbow. "That's beautiful," Ms. Rodriguez said. "But why a rainbow?" "Because," Sophie explained, wisdom beyond her years in her voice, "rainbows are bridges between different places, and they make everything more beautiful." That evening, as James picked her up from Catherine's, Sophie ran between her parents, giving them each a hug. "I figured it out," she announced. "Figured what out, sweetheart?" James asked. "How to have 2 rooms, 2 homes, 2 everything." She pulled out her notebook, showing them her list. "The important things are the same. The rest is just extra." Catherine and James shared a look over their daughter's head. Once again, she was teaching them how to navigate this new life they were building. The family tree worksheet sat on Catherine's kitchen island, its neat branches looking deceptively simple. Sophie frowned at it, pencil hovering uncertainly over the paper. "Ms. Rodriguez says we have to present them next week," she said. "But the paper doesn't have enough spaces." Catherine looked over her daughter's shoulder. The standard worksheet showed spots for mother, father, and siblings, with branches extending up to grandparents. No space for step-siblings, bonus parents, or the complex web of love that made up their modern family. "Too many people to love?" Catherine asked gently. "Too many people to fit," Sophie corrected. "See, there's only one mom spot, but I need room for Thomas too, because he's my stepdad. And Sarah and Michael are my step-siblings, but there's no place for them either." James arrived for the custody exchange just as Sophie was attempting to draw extra branches on the worksheet. "School project?" he asked, setting down Sophie's overnight bag. "Family tree," Catherine explained, watching his expression carefully. These moments still had the potential to be awkward, laden with the weight of their unusual situation. But James just pulled up a stool. "Looks like we need a bigger tree." Sophie's face lit up. "Can we make our own? A special one?" "I don't see why not," Catherine said, "as long as it shows the same information Ms. Rodriguez asked for." They cleared the island, spreading out large art paper from Catherine's craft room. Sophie positioned herself between her parents, armed with markers and determination. "Let's put me in the middle," she directed, "like the heart of the tree." James drew a circle, and Sophie colored it with her favorite purple marker. From there, they began mapping out their complicated, beautiful family web. "We need a branch for Dad," Sophie said. "A big, strong one because you held everything together." She drew it in brown, adding little wrenches and tools to show his work. "And one for Mom," she continued, "with lots of leaves because you're growing back into our lives." This branch she decorated with butterflies, symbols of transformation. They added Thomas and his children, James's parents, though they left his mother's connection dotted after everything they'd learned, Catherine's family, and even a special branch for Dr. Martinez, who Sophie insisted was part of their story. "What about these?" James asked, pointing to some empty spaces Sophie had deliberately left. "Those are for future family," Sophie explained, "in case Dad finds someone special like Mom found Thomas, or in case we get more brothers and sisters. Someday." Catherine and James exchanged glances, touched by their daughter's expansive view of family. "Ms. Rodriguez might want something more traditional," Catherine ventured. "Then I'll make her one of those too," Sophie decided. "But this is our real tree. It shows how love grows in all directions." They spent the evening adding details to the tree. Important dates, special memories, little symbols that represented each person's role in their story. Sophie insisted on adding the park where she'd first recognized Catherine, the ice cream shop where they'd had their first family, therapy, homework, and both her bedrooms. "It's not really a tree anymore," James observed, looking at the intricate web of connections. "It's a family forest," Sophie declared proudly, "because sometimes you need more than one tree to show all the love." When James left that evening, Sophie insisted on making a copy of the family forest for his apartment. "So we can add to it in both places," she explained. Later, as Catherine was tucking Sophie into bed, her daughter asked, "Do you think other kids have family forests too?" "I'm sure many do," Catherine said. Families grow in all sorts of ways these days. Then why do they give us worksheets with only one way to be a family? Catherine smoothed Sophie's hair. Sometimes it takes time for everyone to understand that love doesn't always fit in neat little boxes. That's why it's brave of you to show them your forest instead. I'm not brave, Sophie yawned. I just love my whole family. Even the complicated parts. Especially the complicated parts. Catherine whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. The Christmas card photo shoot was Catherine's idea, though she'd been nervous about suggesting it. Too much, too soon, she'd asked Thomas that morning. But Sophie had been ecstatic, and even James had agreed without hesitation. Now they stood in Catherine's garden, surrounded by professional lighting equipment and holiday decorations. The photographer looked bewildered by the unusual grouping. James in his carefully pressed shirt, Catherine and Thomas in coordinating sweaters, Sophie bouncing between them all in a red velvet dress she'd picked herself. Maybe this was a mistake, Catherine whispered to James as the photographer adjusted his equipment. Sophie's happy, James replied simply, and she was, radiant with the joy of having all her favorite people in one place. How do you want to arrange them? The photographer asked, clearly trying to be diplomatic. Before anyone could answer, Sophie took charge. I want to sit in the middle, she announced, with Mom and Dad on either side and Thomas next to Mom, because that's how our family forest grows. The adults exchanged glances, then followed her direction. The first few photos were stiff, everyone too aware of the unusual situation. But then Sophie started making silly faces, and James couldn't help but laugh, and Catherine's genuine smile broke through her nervous expression. Perfect, the photographer called. Hold that natural feeling. Later, reviewing the photos on the computer screen, they found the moment captured perfectly, Sophie mid-laugh. James and Catherine looking at her instead of the camera, their faces soft with shared love, Thomas watching the whole scene with gentle understanding. That's the one, Sophie declared. It shows our real family. Are you sure? Catherine asked. We took some more traditional poses. This is our tradition now, Sophie said firmly. Being real. The photo sparked a longer discussion about holiday plans. They gathered in Catherine's kitchen, Sophie's unicorn notebook open to a fresh page. Christmas Eve has always been our special time, James said carefully. We make cookies for Santa from scratch, Sophie added. Not fancy ones like Mom's chef makes. Catherine caught the implied comparison. Maybe we could do both, learn from each other's traditions. I could teach Pierre my cookie recipe, James offered, surprising everyone. If you'd both like to join us on Christmas Eve? Really? Sophie's eyes lit up. In our apartment? Really? James met Catherine's gaze. Family forest, right? Christmas Eve found them all in James's small kitchen, flour dusting every surface. Sophie had insisted they all wear matching aprons, a gift from Thomas, who'd bowed out gracefully to spend the evening with his own children. You have to press the cookie cutter all the way down, Sophie instructed Catherine, who was attempting to cut out perfect stars. Dad says lopsided cookies taste better anyway. Does he now? Catherine laughed, deliberately making her next. Star asymmetrical. James watched them together, his heart full of an emotion he couldn't quite name. Here was Catherine in his humble kitchen, learning their traditions while adding her own touches, like the imported chocolate chips she'd brought and the fancy sprinkles that Sophie adored. Time for the secret ingredient, Sophie announced. Secret ingredient? Catherine asked. Extra love, James and Sophie said together, then laughed at Catherine's expression. We tap each cookie 3 times and make a wish, James explained. Sophie invented it when she was 4. Catherine's eyes glistened as she watched their familiar ritual. Can I try? You have to mean it, Sophie said seriously. The wishes only come true if you really believe in love. They tapped cookies and made wishes until the kitchen timer buzzed. As they waited for the cookies to cool, Sophie arranged them all for a selfie, insisting they keep their flour-dusted aprons on. For the family album, she explained, to show how our traditions got bigger. Later that night, after Sophie had finally fallen asleep waiting for Santa, Catherine helped James clean up the kitchen. "Thank you," she said softly, "for sharing this with me. Thank you for wanting to be part of it." He handed her the last dish to dry. "Even our messy, imperfect version of holidays, especially that," Catherine smiled. "It's real, like the Christmas photo." They looked at the kitchen selfie Sophie had insisted on printing immediately. It wasn't professional, like the garden photo shoot. The lighting was poor, their aprons were stained, and Sophie's hair was falling out of its careful style. But their smiles were genuine, their joy unscripted. This, they both knew, was the real gift of the season, the chance to build something new while honoring what came before. A family forest, growing stronger with each new tradition they dared to plant. The business plan sat unopened on James's kitchen table, its crisp pages and professional binding, a stark contrast to his coffee-stained placemat. Catherine had dropped it off earlier, along with Sophie's forgotten math homework. "Just take a look," she'd said. "Thomas has connections in the automotive industry. Your experience, his contacts, my business background. We could build something amazing." Now, hours later, James finally opened it. The title page read, "Mitchell Advanced, Auto Care, Full-Service Luxury Vehicle Maintenance." Below was a mock-up of a logo, his name, but reimagined with sleek professional styling. "What's that?" Sophie asked, appearing beside him in her pajamas. "A possible change," James said carefully. "For the garage, the fancy one Mom and Thomas want to help you build." Sophie climbed onto a chair. "Jenny's dad takes his car to a fancy garage. He says normal ones don't know how to fix his special engine." James smiled despite himself. Out of the mouths of babes, Catherine had made the same point in her pitch. There was a gap in the market for high-end automotive care in their area, and with his expertise, he flipped through the business plan. The projections were solid, the marketing strategy thoughtful. Catherine had even included a section on maintaining affordability for his existing customers while expanding into the luxury market. "Would we have to move?" Sophie asked. "Always." Cutting to the heart of things. "No, sweetheart. The new garage would be across town, but our home would stay the same." "Good." Sophie traced the logo with her finger. "Because I like our apartment. Even though Mom's house is bigger, this is where we learned to be brave together." James hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "When did you get so wise?" "Dr. Martinez says I get it from both of you." Sophie yawned. "Are you scared of the change, Daddy? Like Mom was scared to come back to us?" The question hit home. Was that what was holding him back? Fear dressed up as pride. After putting Sophie to bed, James called Catherine. "You've read it?" she asked. "It's a good plan," he admitted. "But Catherine, I can't take charity." "It's not charity, James. It's investment in talent. Thomas and I would be silent partners. You'd run everything. Why?" The question that had been nagging him. "Why do this?" Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Because you spent 6 years building a life for Sophie while I was away. Because you're an incredible mechanic who deserves a chance to build something bigger. Because Sophie deserves to see both her parents succeed. And if it fails, then you'll still have your current garage, your existing clients, and a daughter who thinks you hang the moon." She paused. "This isn't about proving anything, James. It's about possibilities." The next day, James brought the business plan to work, sharing it with his longtime employee, Mike. "Boss, this is solid," Mike said, reviewing the numbers. "That new development they're building up by the lake? All multi-million-dollar homes. They'll need someone who knows luxury vehicles." "It's a big risk," James hedged. "Bigger risk is letting fear stop you," Mike grinned. "Besides, you've already done the scariest thing, letting your ex back into your life for Sophie's sake. This is just business." That evening, James sat down with the business plan again, this time with his reading. Glasses on and a legal pad beside him, he began making notes, questions about insurance, ideas for specialized training, thoughts on retaining his core customers. Sophie found him still working an hour later. "Are you writing our next chapter?" she asked, pointing to his notes. "What? Do you mean, like in my unicorn notebook, each time something changes, we write the story together?" She climbed into his lap. "Can I help write this one?" James handed her a pen, and together they added to his notes. Chapter 14. Daddy's Big Adventure. Keep fixing regular cars because everybody needs help sometimes. Learn about fancy cars because it's good to try new things. Let Mom and Thomas help because family forests grow stronger together. Stay brave even when things are scary. Remember that home is where love lives, not where cars get fixed. Looking at their joint additions, James felt something shift inside him. Perhaps this was what Catherine had meant about possibilities, not just in business, but in all the ways they were learning to grow together. He texted Catherine, "Let's schedule a proper meeting. Bring the lawyers and the accountants, but Sophie gets to design the employee uniforms." Her response came quickly. "Already got her sketches. Hope you like purple." James looked at his daughter, who was now drawing little hearts around their chapter title. "Hey, Sophie, want to help Daddy dream up something new?" Her smile was all the answer he needed. The wedding invitation was different from any James had received before. Instead of the traditional Mr. and Mrs. format, it read, "Sophie Mitchell joyfully invites you to celebrate the marriage of her mother, Catherine Chen, to Thomas Bradford, who has already proven himself to be a wonderful addition to our family forest." James found himself smiling despite the complexity of emotions the invitation stirred. This was pure Sophie, their daughter's touch evident in every word. "Did you help write this?" he asked Sophie over breakfast. She nodded, milk mustache adorning her upper lip. "Mum said I could make it special because it's not just her and Thomas getting married. It's all of us becoming more family." The wedding was to be an intimate affair in Catherine's garden, the same spot where they'd taken their Christmas photos. As the day approached, Sophie's excitement grew exponentially. "I get to be the flower girl," she announced to anyone who would listen, "and Dad's coming, and Sarah and Michael are junior attendants, and we're all wearing purple." Catherine had approached James about his attendance carefully. "We want you there," she'd said. "Thomas insisted, but only if you're comfortable." Comfortable wasn't quite the right word for watching your ex-wife marry another man. But when he saw how much it meant to Sophie, how could he refuse? The morning of the wedding, James helped Sophie prepare in their apartment. She twirled in her flower girl dress, a compromise between Catherine's elegant taste and Sophie's love of sparkles. "Do you think Mom is nervous?" Sophie asked as James attempted to recreate the fancy braid Catherine usually did. "Probably a little," James admitted. "Most people are on their wedding day." "Were you when you married Mom?" James's hands stilled in her hair. They hadn't talked much about their own marriage, unsure how to explain it to Sophie. "Yes," he said finally. "I was nervous, but happy too, just like your mom is today." "Are you sad?" Sophie's eyes met his in the mirror. "About Mom marrying Thomas?" "No, sweetheart." And he was surprised to find it was true. "I'm happy your mom found someone who makes her happy, who helps her be the best mother she can be." Sophie considered this. "Like how she helps you be the best daddy by believing in your new garage." Exactly like that. The garden was transformed when they arrived. White chairs lined the grass, purple flowers everywhere, and an arch of roses where Thomas waited. Catherine had yet to appear, but her presence was felt in every perfect detail. "James." Thomas approached, looking nervous despite his elegant tuxedo. "Thank you for coming. It means everything to Sophie, to all of us." Before James could respond, Sophie tugged at Thomas's sleeve. "Is it time yet? Did you practice your special promises?" Thomas knelt to her level. "I did, including the extra one you helped me write." "What extra one?" James asked. "My promise to always respect and support Sophie's relationship with both her parents," Thomas said quietly. "She was very specific about the wording." James felt his throat tighten. Their daughter, writing her own rules for how family should work. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Catherine appeared in a cream-colored dress that made Sophie gasp with delight. But it was the vows that caught everyone's attention. Thomas went first, including his promise to Sophie. Then Catherine spoke, her voice clear and strong. "I promise to love you, Thomas, and to build a life with you that honors all the pieces of our family forest, to be faithful, honest, and brave. Because my daughter taught me that love grows stronger when we face our fears together." She turned to include Sophie in her gaze. "I promise to nurture all the branches of our family tree, to remember that love multiplies rather than divides, and to always keep my heart open to new possibilities." During the reception, James found himself at a table with Dr. Martinez, who'd been invited at Sophie's insistence. "Quite a journey from that first therapy session," she observed. James watched Sophie dancing with both Catherine and Thomas, her face alight with joy. "If you'd told me a year ago I'd be at Catherine's wedding, actually happy for her." Sometimes, the best families are the ones we choose to build, even when it's complicated. Dr. Martinez smiled. "Or especially when it's complicated." Later, as Sophie threw rose petals with abundant enthusiasm, Catherine caught James's eye across the garden. She mouthed, "Thank you," and he nodded in response. They had found their way to this moment, this new chapter, through all the messy, beautiful work of putting their daughter first. The family calendar hung in both houses now, identical magnetic boards with color-coded events and cheerful stickers. Sophie had insisted on the matching setup, arguing that organized love is better than chaotic love, a phrase she'd picked up from Dr. Martinez. 1 year after the wedding, the calendars told the story of their success. Dance recitals marked in purple, James's garage opening celebration in blue, family therapy sessions in green, and countless shared dinners, school events, and impromptu ice cream outings dotted throughout. Catherine stood in her kitchen, adding, "A new event, Sophie's science fair," when James dropped their daughter off after his weekend. "Already got it marked," he said, noticing her activity. "She's been practicing her presentation all weekend. Did you know sound waves could be so exciting?" "Only when Sophie explains them," Catherine smiled. "How was the new garage this weekend?" "Full booking through next month." James couldn't hide his pride. "That marketing plan you developed is really working." Sophie bounded into the kitchen. Still wearing the Mitchell Advanced Auto Care cap James had given all his employees. "Dad let me help with the computers. I'm getting really good at scheduling." "Speaking of scheduling," Catherine pointed to the calendar, "we need to plan your birthday. 8 is a big number. Can we have it at Dad's new garage?" Sophie asked. "The fancy waiting room would be perfect for a science party." James and Catherine exchanged glances. A year ago, such a suggestion would have sparked tension about appearances and appropriateness. Now it just made sense. "We could set up experiment stations," Catherine mused. "Thomas knows a science educator who does amazing demonstrations. And I can show everyone the eco-friendly oil recycling system," Sophie added. "It's like a real-life science lesson." James shook his head, amused. "Most kids want princess parties. Mine wants to teach her friends about environmental responsibility." "She gets that from you," Catherine said softly. "That passion for making things better." The calendar caught Sophie's eye. "Oh, don't forget to mark the garage's first anniversary. We need to celebrate that too." "Already marked in gold star stickers," James pointed out. "Your mum's idea. Important milestones deserve special recognition," Catherine said. "Speaking of which," she hesitated, then forged ahead. "Thomas and I were thinking of taking a family vacation this summer. All of us, if you're interested." James looked surprised. "All of us?" "The whole forest," Sophie declared. "Like a family reunion, but with people who aren't all related, but love each other anyway. We could rent a beach house," Catherine suggested. "Plenty of room for everyone, no pressure, just together time." James studied the calendar, taking in all the evidence of their successful co-parenting over the past year. The shared holidays, the easy exchanges, the way they'd learned to make space for each other in Sophie's life. "I'd like that," he said, finally, As long as I get to teach Sophie about marine engines. Only if I get to learn too. Sophie bounced on her toes. Can we mark it on the calendar, in all the colors? They watched as she carefully drew a rainbow square around a week in July, labeling it Whole Forest Vacation in her neat handwriting. Later, after James had left and Sophie was doing homework, Catherine found herself staring at the calendar. Each mark, each note, each colored square represented a choice they'd made to put their daughter first, to build something new from the pieces of their past. She added one final note to today's date. Remember to be grateful, because sometimes the biggest victories were in the small moments. A shared smile over Sophie's enthusiasm, an easy conversation about schedules, the way they'd learned to make room for each other in their daughter's heart. The calendar wasn't just a scheduling tool anymore. It was a testament to their journey, a daily reminder that love could grow in unexpected ways when given room to flourish. The college savings account statement arrived at both houses on the same day, a deliberate choice that reflected their commitment to transparency. Sophie's future, they had decided, would be a shared responsibility. Mitchell Bradford Educational. Trust for Sophie, read the header, followed by a healthy balance that represented 18 months of cooperative planning. Catherine sat in James's living room, a place that no longer felt awkward or uncomfortable, reviewing the quarterly report. The investment strategy is working better than expected. The garage's profits helped, James acknowledged. He'd insisted on contributing equally, using the success of Mitchell Advanced Auto Care to match Catherine and Thomas's contributions. Though I still think we should tell her about it soon. She's only 8, Catherine pointed out. 8 going on 30, James smiled. Yesterday she asked me to explain compound interest. Sophie was at her desk nearby working on what she called her future book, a notebook filled with career, ideas, college research, and detailed plans that seemed impossibly advanced for her age. Did you know some colleges have programs where you can study both engineering and marine biology? She asked without looking up. I could design better boats for ocean scientists. James and Catherine exchanged knowing looks. Their daughters' dreams were as big as their hopes for her. I found something interesting, Catherine said, pulling out her tablet. There's a summer program for gifted children. Science, engineering, arts, everything Sophie loves. But she hesitated. But what? James asked. It's in California. 4 weeks. Catherine watched his reaction carefully. All 3 of us would need to agree on this. A year ago, the suggestion of Sophie being so far away would have sparked protective anxiety in James. Now he found himself considering it objectively. Tell me more, he said. Sophie perked up, abandoning her future book. California? Where they have those huge redwood trees? As Catherine pulled up the program details, Thomas arrived with dinner. Their weekly family meal had become a comfortable tradition. Perfect timing, Catherine said. We're discussing Sophie's summer plans. The engineering program? Thomas asked, setting down the food. At their surprised looks, he explained, Sophie mentioned her interest last week. I did some research. James felt a familiar warmth at how invested Thomas was in Sophie's future. Their family forest had grown in unexpected but beautiful ways. Look, Sophie pointed to the screen. They have a robotics lab, and ocean studies, and, she gasped, space engineering. The adults watched her excitement build, each seeing different aspects of her potential future. James saw her mechanical aptitude, Catherine recognized her analytical mind, and Thomas noted her artistic creativity in approaching problems. It's a big step, James said carefully, being away from home. But that's part of growing up, isn't it? Sophie asked. Like how Mom had to grow up and be brave to come back to us, and how you were brave to let her. Catherine blinked back tears. When did you get so wise? Family therapy, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Dr. Martinez says understanding our feelings helps us make better choices. They spent dinner discussing the program, its costs already covered, by the educational trust they'd established. Sophie took detailed notes in her future book, creating pros and cons lists that made them all smile. "I have one condition," James said finally. "We all fly out to get you settled, and either your mom or I will be in California the whole time, trading off halfway through. The garage can spare you," Catherine added quickly. "And I can work remotely. And I'll hold down the fort here," Thomas offered. "Keep everything running smoothly." Sophie looked at them all, her face serious. "You really think I can do this, sweetheart?" Catherine reached for her hand. "You've already done the hardest thing. You helped us learn how to be a real family. Everything else is just details." Later, as they cleaned up dinner, James found Sophie adding to her future book. Under a new section titled California Adventure, she'd written, "Things I know, Dad and Mom believe in me. Dreams are bigger when your whole family helps being brave runs in our forest. Love doesn't care about distance. My future has room for everything I want to be." James showed the list to Catherine, who showed it to Thomas. In that moment, looking at their daughter's confident plans, they all knew. Every decision they'd made, every compromise they'd reached, had led to this. A child secure enough to dream big, supported by a family strong enough to help those dreams take flight. The new family portrait sat on easels in both homes, an artistic photograph taken at the same park where their story began. But this time, there was no chance encounter, no startled recognition. This time, they had gathered deliberately. Their entire family forest represented in the fading summer light. Sophie stood in the center, 8 years old and confident, flanked by James and Catherine. Thomas stood beside Catherine, his children Sarah and Michael next to him. Even Dr. Martinez had joined them, Sophie insisting their therapy graduation deserved documentation. "Remember when I first saw you here?" Sophie asked, swinging between her parents just like she had that fateful day. They'd come back to the park to celebrate her acceptance into the California summer program. "How could we forget?" Catherine smiled. "You recognized me somehow." "I always knew what you looked like," Sophie said. "Dad made sure I did." James squeezed her hand. "I made sure you knew you were loved by both of us, even when things were complicated." The park had changed little in the past 2 years. The same swings creaked in the breeze. The same mansion, Catherine's house, stood watch across the street. But everything else had transformed. "Look what I found," Sophie said, pulling her ever-present unicorn notebook from her backpack. She opened to the first page, where she'd pasted the original Christmas photo of their awkward beginning. Beside it was the wedding picture, then the garage opening celebration, and finally, their newest portrait. "Our whole story," she said proudly, "all the chapters." Catherine traced the progression of photos. "You've been documenting everything. Dr. Martinez says it's good to remember where we came from, to see how far we've grown." Sophie flipped to a fresh page. "And we're not done yet. We still have California, and maybe more siblings someday, and all sorts of new adventures." James watched his daughter's confident planning, remembering the days when he'd barely been able to imagine a future beyond their next meal. Now, with the garage thriving and their unusual family finding its rhythm, the future seemed full of possibility. "Ice cream?" Thomas called from a nearby bench. "To celebrate properly?" "Same place as always?" Sophie asked hopefully. "Same place as always," they all agreed. As they walked toward their favorite ice cream shop, Sophie between her parents, just as she had been that first day, Catherine caught James's eye over their daughter's head. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving me the chance to be part of this story." "Thank you," he replied, "for coming back and finishing it." Sophie looked up at them both. "It's not finished," she corrected. "It's just getting really good." And there, in the gentle evening light with ice cream ahead and love all around, they knew she was right. Their family forest would keep growing, keep changing, keep making room for new joy and new challenges. Some stories, after all, don't end. They just keep adding chapters, each one richer than the last.